Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 21st, 2019 meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board. I invite everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a bit of housekeeping to get through this evening, so I appreciate your indulgence as we kind of work through the agenda in a somewhat different order than the order it's presented. The first issue that we will take care of is because of the number of appeals that were on the original schedule for this evening's meeting. We have called a special meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board to be held on Thursday, April the 4th at 7 p.m. in this room. There are at least two matters that will be considered at that meeting, Appeal 3033 and Appeal 3035. So if there is anyone here for those meetings, those appeals, you do not have to stay for this evening. You're certainly more than welcome to do so, but those matters will be considered on April the 4th. We have a couple other matters. First, in Appeal 3029, Villanova University. Counsel for the university is here with us, and there is a request for continuance. Counsel?
That's correct. As you know, Mr. Riley, Nick Cornelia representing Villanova University on this matter. As you know, the Township Board of Commissioners had voted to send their solicitor in opposition to this application. We've been working, trying to resolve our differences with the Board of Commissioners. We're trading agreements back and forth. Hopefully we'll have something resolved to present to this board at the next hearing. I don't know if it'll be the next hearing, but again, we're working to try to resolve it. So for that reason, we're requesting continuance, and the Board of Commissioners have no objection to it. Mr. Rice told me he has no objection to it and actually concurs in the continuance.
Okay, thank you. As you know, this is not the first continuance
Yes.
that has been considered in this matter, and as has been previously discussed at the time of prior continuance requests, the reason for the continuance needs to be a compelling one, because there is currently an enforcement proceeding that is, being addressed through this appeal. So to the extent the parties are having conversations to perhaps get to an amicable resolution of the matter, that, we don't want to stand in the way of that. But absent that sort of a reason for the continuance request, I think that we've probably reached the limit that we're going to be willing to grant without some compelling reason. Right. So without objection, I think the April 4th continuance is appropriate.
Right. And just so the board is aware, remember the Board of Commissioners have to approve any agreement that we would reach. There is one meeting, which is Monday night, between now and April 4th. I just don't know if it's going to get done on Monday evening, and if not, we probably would be, I don't want to mislead the board that this may be the last continuance, but there could be an additional continuance with the consent of the Board of Commissioners. And also, as the board is aware, we do have a schedule that we presented to the board as to the times that the field is in use. We now are approaching the end of the semester, so those times probably wouldn't even be used come May or June.
All right, thanks. And obviously, you'll keep us informed.
Yes.
In the event that you need something beyond the 4th. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the agenda item, appeal number 2979. I've got the old, you have the new agenda, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for the description of the matter. Is that the new agenda? Great, thanks. Thank you. Appeal 2979, the applicant Scott Emerson, property located at 409, 411, and 413 East Lancaster Avenue, request an extension of time for obtaining a permit under Section 280-144 of the zoning code, and for an additional 6-month extension to October 25th, 2019. Counsel?
Jamie Junn here on behalf of Scott Emerson.
Excuse me, I need your name slowly and spelled.
Jamie Junn, Jamie, last name Jun. And our current approval expires April 25th, so we are asking for a 6-month extension. Currently, we're still working on meeting the final plan conditions of approval, and we're right now working through the PennDOT permitting process. So we will need a little bit of a time to complete that.
Is there an anticipated time for PennDOT's approval, or?
We had already made a submission, and we received a comment letter back. There's aspects of the project which are off-site, and I think that's adding to the delay where we need to get approval from those off-site property owners in order to proceed with the permitting.
Any questions from the board? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. If I could get a
Motion to grant the requested 6-month extension.
second?
I'll second it.
Any board discussion? Any public discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Okay, the next matter, excuse me, the next matter is Appeal 3031. I will let George Nagel read the full notice into the record. As was previously the case in the last meeting, I recused myself from consideration of this matter, and I will do so again this evening.
Okay. You moving out?
All right, I'll move over.
Okay, this is appeal number 3031. The applicant Smith or Smythe? Smythe Family Realty LLC, property located at 327 East Lancaster Avenue and zoned C3 commercial. Applicant seeks to construct an addition to the rear of its existing building. The site is legally non-conforming in regards to the number of off-street parking spaces. Applicant shall maintain the existing number of parking spaces, but requests the ability to provide the stacking of a number of the spaces. As a result, the applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-4 and/or 280-103B of the zoning code regarding the size of the parking spaces and their accessibility to a driveway. In the alternative, applicant requests a variance from Section 280-103B 20 of the zoning code regarding the required number of on-site parking spaces or such other relief from the zoning code consistent with the exhibits presented. Nick, can you give us an update on procedurally where we are from
Yeah.
last month?
You may recall last month, this was sent to the Planning Commission, since it is a land development application, for their recommendation. And Kevin can confirm, we don't have anything in writing, but after reviewing the plans and us presenting testimony, they determined they had no objection to the relief being requested. And Kevin, I think Kevin would agree that that was the outcome.
That is
of
accurate.
Okay. All right, that's great, thank you. And you can proceed.
Sure, thank you. Already before the board, you have exhibits A1 through A7. I have added A7A, which basically replaces A7, A8, A9, A10, and A11, and I'll hand them up to the board, and I'll explain to them when the time comes what they represent.
Okay?
Just by way, I'd like to go through some brief history. As the board is aware, this is a request for relief on parking, and we'll explain what in particular that relief is. But I'd like to just show the board a couple items by way of a brief presentation opening. First, I'm going to show you what's the mark as A8. You have that in your packet. This is prior to this site being developed and what it was. It was an automobile dealership back probably in the early 2000s and prior to that as well. And it had parking for the automobile dealership in the front, and the building was in the rear here. Now, I think as the board's aware that back in the early 2000s, we made application for relief to put an addition on this building. The Board of Commissioners and even the zoning board said, you know, let's think about some other alternatives for this site instead of just a large automobile dealership. So eventually, through numerous discussions, the board came back with an alternative that was eventually turned into a zoning amendment to the zoning code. And the building was placed in the front of the site with parking in the rear, and then this area in the rear here was developed into condominiums, which is now the Pembroke North condominiums. Just showing you A3, which kind of shows a comparison. So here's the current site for the car dealership. Here are the condominiums. And you'll notice it's actually a good photo because it shows the building pushed up front with the parking either on the side or in the rear of the building. A big discussion there was to take the parking out of the front yard like it currently exists on the old Acme site, which is now strip stores. And it's still there on the old Acme site, but this was an opportunity to redevelop this site and have the building in the front with the parking in the rear, and then a residential component in the other portion of the site. That has since been subdivided off and is now Pembroke North condominium. Also, we'll present to the board A9. And A9 represented what happened back, I believe it was about 2004, 2005 with this site. This was the approved site plan for the car dealership. You notice the building in the front. The sidewalk actually pulled off Lancaster Avenue, again at the request of the township, and it made it windy so that you had a buffer area between Lancaster Avenue and the sidewalk for pedestrians that would be walking on Lancaster Avenue in that area. It still had this parking on the side, which was non-conforming at the time, and today continues to be non-conforming. Nothing really changes with that parking. This particular site also was given credit for 23 indoor parking spaces. Now, with the new addition that is being required by I guess Land Rover Jaguar International is really driving the reason for this new addition. We've reduced those number of parking spaces from 23 to 13 in the site. The old plan also showed the current stacking in the rear here. Approximately 16 spaces were stacked in the rear, but they were not counted toward the number at that time, which was the required number. The required number at that time of parking spaces were 61 parking spaces. The code has since changed. That 61 parking spaces was based on gross lot area, 1 space per 1,000 gross lot area. There's no provision in the Radnor code for automobile dealerships, so it was based on the other category being gross lot area, and it was 1 per 1,000, which at the time required 61 parking spaces. That has now been changed to 1 per 300. So the site is currently non-conforming as to the number of existing parking spaces. What you'll hear here this evening is that Mike, the owner of the dealership, Mike Smythe, is very diligent on controlling the parking in this situation. There's two components here. You have the the sales component of the cars as well as the repair component of the vehicles as well. And you'll hear Mike testify as to how that works and how there is no shortage of parking for the customers. And really, this stacked parking is being used for inventory. As you know, any automobile dealership likes to have inventory there. So when a customer does come in, he can see various vehicles. So I'll ask what we have. We have Mike Smythe, the owner of the dealership, and Brendan Dorley, who's a civil engineer on the project, and if Norma can swear them in, and we'll proceed with the testimony.
If you will both raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And state your name one at a time and spell them, please.
Michael Smythe, S-M-Y-T-H.
Brendan Dorley, B-R-E-N-D-E-N, D-O-R-L-E-Y.
George, should I maybe use the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Mike, step right up.
Okay.
What is your relationship to this site? Are you the owner of the site?
I am the owner of the site.
And basically, the Smythe Family Realty LLC is the owner of the site, which is,
That is correct. So my wife and I are partners, and we own the site.
okay.
Yes.
And I've marked the deed as A2?
Yes,
Okay. And do you also own the business that is on the site?
I do. I'm the owner-operator of the business.
And what business is that?
Jaguar Land Rover Mainline.
Okay. And how long has Jaguar Land Rover been at the site?
We developed the site in 2006, was our first year of operation with the building that Nick showed here today.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A3 that I did refer to during opening statement. And this was prepared by Brendan's company, AEC Engineering, and it shows in red the actual site itself, correct?
That is correct.
And to the west of that site is, I guess, would be the strip stores, the strip retail stores?
Correct. That's formerly Acme. That's now various retail stores in there.
And to the west, in the back of the site, is the condominiums that we talked about, North?
That is correct.
And next to you on the west adjacent is the American Legion building.
That is correct as well.
And we have a string of commercial buildings as you proceed east on Lancaster until you come to the other apartment buildings on Lancaster Avenue.
All correct.
And across the street is Bryn Mawr Trust
Yes.
Bank. And then a little bit further down on the west across the street is the CVS, the Verizon store, and the two gas stations, the BP and the Sunoco station.
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're not talking.
Did you get that, Norma? Should I repeat that? Okay. Are you all right with it? Or?
I struggle. Just
Okay, okay. Now, you heard during my opening statement an explanation of how this site got developed. Was that an accurate explanation of what happened here back in the early 2000s?
It was when we went before the board in the early, in that time period. We really, at the request of the township, they were adamant about improving how the township looked commercially, kind of removing the perception of how the commercial buildings looked, and really wanted to see a warmer, friendlier building pulled as close to the street as possible. And as we did that, they wanted to see us develop the sidewalk that came off of Lancaster Avenue and kind of scooted along the front of the property. And there were a number of concessions in order to, as we looked at developing the site and trying to do the things that would address the needs of the township.
And they also expressed a desire to have the parking in the rear of the building, or at least
That,
not in front of the building.
That is 100% correct. Former owner prior to us, a number of issues that we've not had, but certainly some things that were not as friendly to the community as we have attempted to operate the business.
And showing you A8, was this an accurate photo of the site prior to you taking ownership?
It was. I mean, we bought the store, and as we developed it, we were the owners when that picture was taken, or thereabouts.
Okay. And prior to you was also automobile dealerships?
That is correct.
Now, you're proposing an addition to this building, actually addition to the rear of the building, is that right?
That is correct. It's a requirement in order for a car dealership to operate successfully. You have to be compliant for the manufacturer's stated facility upgrades and improvements. So Jaguar and Land Rover corporately have dictate how the building looks and the changes that you have to make in order to be compliant. And that's what's driving the whole process here tonight.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A7A, and Brendan can further elaborate on it as it relates to this application. And Brendan, I'll call you as a witness separately. Now, Mike, still you for now.
Okay.
Mr. Keneally, while you're doing that, we're going to substitute 7A for 7?
Yes, I think that's probably right, Brendan. 7A is really a substitute.
Just to keep it safe?
Okay.
Understood.
Showing you what's been marked as 7A, which is the substitute for A7, and this shows a proposed one-story addition to the rear of the building.
That is correct.
Okay, and also a proposed one-story addition to the rear of the building on the side.
Correct, although you have piers here, and it's currently kind of an area where a car is parked. That is correct. You would enclose that area and corner off that building.
Okay, tell the board, where do your employees park? Do they park on site, or do you have them park off site?
There's a number of places currently, but we lease the Earl site over at Burkett and Pennsylvania Avenue, so we have significant parking over there. We lease a number of the Civitello lots, which is on Burkett. So we are kind of scattered back in off of Pennsylvania Avenue parking. And then we operate a valet system within the lot in which, as employees come to the dealership to work, their cars are valeted during their time of work and then valeted back to them.
We had talked in the opening a little bit about the types of customers that you have. What are the type of customers that you have? Is it kind of a twofold business?
Well, we have it's a little bit of a niche automotive, non-traditional automotive store. So while we have a very high penetration for Land Rover of North America, we have the customers that certainly have the flexibility of coming to the dealership on their schedule at their time, at their convenience. And we have seen, because of internet shopping and how that's all evolved, the number of visits per automotive experience has dropped dramatically in the past 5 years. So 5 years ago, when we came before the Township a long time ago, it was significantly higher. It's now down to 1.2 visits on average. So we're seeing a dramatic reduction in how traffic flows to the dealership, and then we're seeing, obviously in the future how cars will be serviced and what will take place reducing as well.
So do you have a service component at the dealership?
It's really a service and sales business, and I think that with the service component, it operates.
How's the service component operate regarding when a customer comes in to drop off their car? What time of day do they normally do that, and how does that work?
You're typically seeing drop-off in the early morning hours, and you are typically seeing customers that will drop off their car and immediately pick up a valet car or a rental car and leave the site.
When you say early morning hours, how early are we talking?
7:30, we start receiving that type of traffic, and we have staff there prepared to expedite the process because our customers are people that are going and moving, and we're trying to make that process flow as efficiently as we possibly can.
So when the service customers are dropping off their cars, do you really have any people on the site, coming to the site to look at vehicles for sales?
Well, we don't have sales staff arriving at the store. I mean, typical sales hours start at 9. So the store is a little bit unique in terms of, to answer your question directly, the sales customers are coming typically at a different time than our service clientele.
And what are your hours of operation?
We operate from a service side 8 o'clock in the morning until, and then the store remains open until 8 o'clock at night, Monday through Thursday. Friday night we close at 7, and Saturday night we close at 5.
And are you open on Sundays?
We are not open on Sundays.
What's your busiest day for, well, first, during the week, how many sales customers would you have come in at, say, any one time?
Well, we have 8 sales desks on the floor. It would be, you'd have 2 or 3 customers coming in to look at a car at any particular time would be what would take place typically between Monday and Friday. Saturday, when our operation kind of changes from a service-oriented operation to a sales-oriented operation, we change the lot and gear it towards a sales experience, and you'll have a significant number of people that are coming just to look at cars. Service operation on Saturday is a catch-up operation which operates on a reduced schedule, 8 to 4. We're really trying to expedite cars that we expected to get back to our customers on Friday, but for a certain reason we couldn't get that car back. So we really see a different operation for service on Saturday, and sales is certainly, that is a peak day for sales.
So your sales and service customers really don't overlap. They're separate times.
They are separate.
Now, looking at 7A, I referred to this aisle back here, which is basically a stacked aisle. There's 16 spaces back there. How are those, what is parked back there in those 16 spaces?
Well, it changes, but typically what we're doing is as customers their cars are coming down into the shop, we have valet cars that are, or loaner cars that are prepared to be brought up so that the customers can leave the dealership as quickly as possible. And so you're seeing a portion of the lot that's dedicated to service cars that are complete, that are being picked up, that are stationary until they arrive. And obviously the customers are not walking out to those cars and picking up those cars. Those cars are brought up by an attendant who brings the car to the customer as they exit the dealership. On the sales side, you do have a number of sales cars that are there for customers to kind of go on a test drive. Once again, you have a salesperson that takes the cars out of the park spot, brings it up to the front of the dealership, and so that our customers can go on a test drive.
And is it also used for inventory as well?
It is. So it's used for some inventory that is required, once again, by the factory. Looking at what, we do not have a significant product lineup, but we do have spaces that are stationary so that they can have inventory in those spaces.
So these spaces to the north of this site, there's really very little, if any, movement in those spaces from day to day?
Unless there's a snowstorm or some reason to move them quickly, we're not having movement in those spaces.
You mentioned the addition, and it's not really a matter for zoning, but here I'm going to show you A10, and is that kind of a rendering of what the building will look like after the addition is completed?
With the exception of the signage that is shown, which would be, there would be a modification and a reduction in that tower-like signage over to more of a monument sign that's consistent, once again, with the image of the township
Yeah,
and
because
what we're
actually
trying
that
to
sign,
accomplish.
we may cover that up, but we don't want Kevin to see that sign, because I don't think that sign's compliant with the sign code.
Yeah, and that's not an
We're
existing
not
sign,
asking
and
for
it's
that,
not a
yeah.
planned sign either.
Yeah.
So it's a rendering.
And showing you A11, is that kind of where the addition is going in the rear of the building, with the rear of the building being here?
That is correct. So this corner of the building, that's currently typically used to deliver a new car. So as we deliver a car, we park it in that spot. We are now taking delivery to the inside of the building as a requirement by Jaguar Land Rover. So the service customer in the morning will be able to pull directly into the building, into a covered area, and they will be greeted by the service writers in that location. So that's the change to the building.
If
Can
you,
I interrupt for a second, Nick? With the additions that you're talking about, do you envision either increasing the number of service bays or the number of employees?
The number of service bays will not change, and the employee count will not change. So there's been a number of concerns regarding the automotive industry and where it goes in the future and what happens. So we see us continuing to be more of a boutique operation and operating in that manner.
is there any way that you could operate your business and comply with the parking requirement without the variance?
Yeah, I think it's an impossibility, and I'd rather come before the township and state, you know, what's required and continue to work to have a very positive relationship with the township.
And just the minimum relief that you need?
It is.
Thank you. That's all I have for Mike.
I don't know if it's a question for Mike or for you. So currently, there are 44 spots? That's what I counted here.
Currently, there are, I believe, I'll let Brendan may be the better one to
Okay.
answer that, yeah.
That'd be great.
You're sworn in.
I'm sworn
Okay.
44 separate from the double stacked, is that you're referring to?
Yeah, I was just counting on the sheet. 16 plus 14 plus, I see 8 and I see 6.
38.
We're showing 62 spaces, but that counts the double stacked as well,
And interior
Double stack or
spaces.
where, in the back?
in the back, yeah. The
And-
last row in the back.
Oh, the last one.
Actually, the first row is not double, they have access. It's the last row in the back that's double
Okay, got it.
stacked.
So the total was what then?
62, and there's also 13 spaces interior.
62. And the old requirement was 61. Did that change when they changed the zoning?
Correct.
Correct.
And what's the current requirement based on that
It's
change?
1 per 300, so,
I don't know if we calculated that.
yeah, it's
It would-
300, it's
It would be
60,000.
It would be about 200, I think over 200.
Let me just go back on that, because I'm still a little confused. The 62, is that all exterior spaces, or does that include some number of interior spaces?
The original plan and the current plan both include interior
Okay.
spaces.
And what, so this would, the relief would add the 16 across the row, right?
Yes.
But I see with 62, you have a drop of 5 from the existing 67. So you're picking up 16, where are the 21 that you're losing on the locations that are being built upon?
Yeah,
Or-
I'm not certain. Do you understand the question? I'm not
Well,
certain. Go
we're,
ahead.
the original plan from 2005 I'm sorry. The original plan from 2005 included 14 spaces in the service area,
Right.
and those are no longer in the building. So that might be where the drop-off is, and then, so now we're including the 15 spaces double stacked to compensate for that.
And actually, this current plan counts less interior spaces
Correct.
than the former plan.
Correct.
I'm still just trying to get from the old to the
Sure.
current to the new. The 67, which is shown on 7A as existing spaces,
Correct.
is that the actual existing or the approved existing?
That's the actual existing spaces
actual
that are
existing.
striped on the lot.
Okay. So you're going from 67 to 62, notwithstanding adding a total of, I guess, 15 on the double stack. If you get the relief,
16, yeah.
15.
It's 15.
So
16 and 14.
I'm just trying to understand what is changing. If you're getting 15 with the relief, what is changing that's causing the total to go from 67 to 62?
The approved A9, which was the approved plan, shows 62. That was the plan from 2004. I believe they restriped, go ahead.
Some of the
You can
parking
testify.
areas on the site, on the property, have been restriped differently than the approved plan.
Okay, well, then let me ask a slightly different question. If you get the relief sought, what will be the difference between the number of spaces that are actually being used now and the number of spaces that you'll have available? And then maybe Mr. Smythe can answer that. I don't know.
You know, as we've gone through and counted spaces and we look at the net gain, at one time we were looking at a total of one space. And if you could walk through and maybe identify, that would be helpful, because I think we're, you know, if you look at that net change and where we're going to, and again, we're not picking up the spaces because they're also non-conforming, and they're not related to the parking area, but you're pulling into the
Bill, I think I can,
drive-through.
let me try answering.
Okay.
The approved plan was 62. They restriped to make 67. Those 67 weren't conforming spaces. They were too small. But they're showed on this plan because they're striped that way. In this instance, we're showing 62, and you'll hear testimony, some of them are too small also. We need relief for it. But we basically removed the smaller spaces that were just restriped from the plan. So yes, it's 5 less, but those 5 were not conforming spaces to the Radnor Township Code for size of parking spaces.
So practically, you're saying if you get the relief, the change in actual volume of spaces is essentially either immaterial or 1 or something
Yes,
like that.
exactly, correct.
Fine, thank you.
Brendan, you're a registered engineer in Pennsylvania,
Yes, I
correct?
am.
And you've testified before this board and other boards
Yes.
for the township previously. And your company, AEC, actually prepared the original plan back in 2004.
Correct.
Right? And you prepared this current plan as well.
Correct.
And we show currently we're asking for 62 parking spaces.
Yes.
How many parking spaces on A9 were approved under the prior plan?
62.
Now, what is the difference between where these parking spaces are located and what was on the prior plan?
They're really in the similar positions. We have 6 parking spaces to the east of the building.
And those 6 parking spaces were approved back in 2004?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
There's-
And they're smaller. They're not code-required parking spaces, right?
They are not 20 feet deep, no.
Okay.
And we're not changing that aspect of those parking spaces in the current plan. We have, with the addition, what we've done is reconfigured the parking spaces immediately behind the building. And The parking spaces to the northeast and the north are not changed from the original design.
We also are reducing the number of parking spaces in the interior, correct?
We are, yes. Originally, there were 23, and now we're proposing 13.
And if you can show the board, we already talked about these spaces which were existing, and then we know we have the 14 spaces back here that are stacked,
Yes.
correct? What other spaces are non-conforming to the Radnor Township Code that are on the site, in addition to what we've already talked about?
There are 4 striped spaces right here. However, the northernmost 2 spaces interfere with access into these spaces. So 2 of these 4 are conforming, and 2 of those 4 are non-conforming.
And again, those 2 non-conforming spaces, they're going to be used for inventory or storage or whatever.
Yes.
All right, they're not being moved in and out for customers.
Are there any handicap spaces?
We're adding one right here with an access aisle into the entrance right here.
Is there any other place on this site to provide parking?
No.
I mean, that's all I have for Brendan. I think the board understands, where we're going here.
I just have one quick question from Mr. Smythe, I think. The arrangements you have for the off-site parking, can you give us some sense of whether it's month-to-month, long-term lease, year-to-year?
We have, over the years, negotiated several arrangements in the community, but the current Earl lease is a 3-year lease, and we're a year into that lease. So additionally, Civitello is more of a month-to-month arrangement.
And that's over on Plant Avenue also, that area, correct?
Correct, correct. And we have tried to acquire both sites and clean them up and develop them and do what we can to, which we will continue to work on and, as part of our long-term strategy in the community.
And how many service employees do you have? I mean, you mentioned 8 desks,
Yep.
and you probably have, that's probably max in sales staff. How many service employees do you have?
Well, there are currently 13 techs in the shop. There's 3 people in the parts department, and when you look at sales is varying staff, but typically 8 sales and then management and administration offices.
Can we go back to A7A? Sure. I did lose track of this, and I apologize, but, so A7A is what you are proposing?
Correct.
Okay, so if you look at the very top northern row, there's 16 on the left, 14 on the right. If you look at the very top row, that's currently stacked?
These are currently stacked.
Okay,
All right, they did not count them originally
okay,
in 2004.
okay.
So they
and-
were still there, but they did not count them as part of the parking requirement in 2004.
And part of your request is to approve these stacked
Correct.
So nothing's changing back there? It's
Correct.
just the way it is today, and you want a blessing for it?
Correct.
Okay, on the side, we have the 6, and I understand that they're non-conforming in size, and you need approval for that.
Yes, if we stripe them conforming in size, then this aisle would be that much less, so.
Okay,
Yeah, it is an existing nonconformity, but again, whether we need approval or it's an existing nonconformity.
okay, so
figure we
so
ask
those are really the 2 things you're asking for?
And there's 2 over here.
These 2 up here.
Oh, the 2 up here, okay. All right, that's helpful, thank you. Anybody have any questions, any further questions? Okay,
Just ask the exhibits to be made part of the record, please.
yeah, so, and we got a substitute A7A for A7, which we talked about, and then the rest of them through A11 are going to be substituted for what was in the original package.
Or additional to what was
In
the
addition to,
original
okay,
package.
great. All right. Is there any, no more questions?
If you don't mind, I just want to make, Ms. Keneally, I just want to make sure. The row of customer parking, for lack of a better word, next to where the handicap spot is, right behind the building. Looking at the old site plan, there's going to be a change there, correct? Just so the board knows that as well,
Yes.
right? How many, so was there a driving aisle in between those spaces, it looks like, at one point?
Showing A9, this is the old site plan.
Yeah, there's a tiny island here, which, as you can see on the new plan, we're going to make it a little smaller where that light post is. But this island here, where a couple handicap spaces were shown, this island will be
You're
removed.
referring to A9, the old A9.
Yeah,
Just
I'm sorry.
disagree.
The original design on A9 from 2005 had a landscaped island here, where, because the building is being pushed out into it, we're getting rid of that island and paving over it, and then adding these parking spaces that face the addition.
Thank you, yeah, that's what I thought, that's what I was seeing, I wanted to make sure the board was being told that as well.
Okay. Have you received any kind of correspondence with neighboring property owners?
Yeah, we've met with the neighbors in the condominium back here. We totally advised them of all the hearings, and they seem to be quite happy with the design and had no objection to what we were doing.
Okay.
We met several times with them, actually, at the dealership. And so they're fully informed of what was going on.
Is there anybody from the audience who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'll open it for discussion with the, it won't be a tie.
No, it won't be tight. How about, can I suggest we make a motion, then discuss the motion?
That's a good suggestion.
I'd like to make a motion that the requested relief be granted in the way of a variance to allow for the amount, location, and type of parking as set forth in the submitted plan.
Okay, can I get a second?
Do I second that? Second it.
Okay, so moved. Discussion?
I think the property from Lancaster Avenue obviously shows very nicely, and they've accommodated the township's prior design requirements to allow for that. And I'm persuaded, given the investment that is in this business, that ownership would not be suggesting something that would be driving a regular parking or capacity problem, because you're not going to do that for a dealership of this type. You're not going to, I just can't imagine they're coming up with something that's going to be problematic. So given the fact that the stacked spaces are going to be essentially stagnant, I think that it's a reasonable use of that back row of spaces, and I'm personally fine with it.
Yeah, I agree. Being a boutique dealership, they probably spend a lot of time going to their customers, getting the cars for them.
Right.
And I think that they're under the pressure from corporate that they don't really have much of a choice and how they evolve and to be successful in that, making that investment. So I think this is something we should support.
Yeah, and to me, it doesn't seem like much is changing from the status quo as far as the parking. Now, you're not asking for anything regarding the building, the addition to the building today, okay? So with that, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Good luck with your project. Okay, John, you're back on.
Okay, moving on. This will be Appeal 3034. The applicants, Christopher and Jennifer Albany, property located at 304 Windsor Avenue and zoned R4 residential. Applicant's property is adjacent to commercial development on its southern rear and eastern side property lines. Applicant seeks to construct a fence 8 feet in height on the eastern side property line to match the 8-foot fence being installed by the commercial development along the rear property line. Applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-109A of the zoning code to permit a fence which exceeds 6 feet in height along the eastern side property line and which exceeds 4 feet in height in that portion of the property line which extends into the front yard setback, or such other relief from the zoning code consistent with the exhibits presented.
Thank you, Nick Cornelia, representing the applicant. Again, just by way of brief opening, this site is near the Wawa on Banbury. So if you came in from Lancaster Avenue, you would make a left onto Windsor, and the first building there is a bank, the UPS building, and office buildings. And then the next building is the Albany's residential property. The bank and the office building and the UPS, as you know, is across the street from the Wawa. And then in front of the Albany's, or in their rear yard, which would be to the south, are the commercial properties on Lancaster Avenue, one of which is a new bank building, which did get relief that's in the packet to install an 8-foot fence, which of course the Albany's concurred in that relief. I believe he's actually present here this evening just to show support for the application as well. So I'll call up Chris and get sworn in.
I do. Christopher Albany, CHRISALBANY. Good evening.
Chris, where do you live?
304 Windsor Avenue in Wayne.
And who do you live there with?
My wife Jennifer, who's in the audience, and we have 4 sons, 2 of which live year-round, and all 4 are home during the summers.
And are they, well, they'll be coming back and forth even when they're old enough. I'm going to show you what's been marked as A2. Is this the copy of the deed
Yes.
that for your property you acquired it in 2008?
Yes, it is.
All right. And I'm going to show you then A3. You heard during my opening I described the location of the property. And if you could just tell the board what A3 represents and location of your property.
Geez, I got to find it here. So
Here's you.
Windsor Avenue, this is my property line right here. My home, Windsor Avenue, what is the BBT Bank facility with UPS. There's a parking lot right here. Glennon First Resource Bank now is going in behind us, which is actually, from an angle standpoint, we don't butt directly behind each other. It's off to the side a little bit. And then we are the last residential home on Windsor coming east towards the Wawa, and this is our neighbor's residential property on that side.
And on the southeast corner, that's the paint store?
Correct.
There in Haley, I believe?
Sherman Williams, I believe.
Sherman Williams,
correct.
Right. And then across the street from the BB&T Bank is the Wawa. The
Correct.
Banbury Wawa.
So Wawa would be approximately right here at the corner where Windsor comes in at Banbury. That Wawa is right there. And then Route 30 traffic runs behind that.
And recently, there was a commercial development, the First Resource Bank,
Correct.
and they got relief to install an 8-foot fence, and that's been marked as A5 in our packet.
Correct, yes.
And showing you what I have as A4. And I will note, and the board is aware of this, in the R4 and R5 zoning district, for whatever reason, the zoning code states that in a front yard, you can only have a 4-foot fence. In the other zoning districts, you can have a 6-foot fence, but for some reason, they said in R4 and R5, and this is in R4, that you're only allowed a 4-foot fence on the front yard setback. So even though it's not across the front, it is in the setbacks, in front of the building, in front of this setback here. So that's the reason why we need relief here. But Chris, just talking about the fencing itself. So we talked about, this is the relief on the rear property line, which is, I guess, your south. To the south of your property is the 8-foot fence of First Resource.
Correct.
First is the 8-foot fence of First Resource Bank. And then along the eastern property line, if you can tell the board the height of this fence, and I believe it's actually shorter as we get closer to the street.
Yeah, so along that eastern property line, which is the side and back and then front, that is a 6-foot picket fence that currently that was put in back in 2014 by the property owner for a BB Bank facility. When they did that, they graded the property on their side, which created a downslope. So while it's 6 feet on their view from the parking lot looking towards my house, from my driveway, from my side property backyard, it's closer to probably 4.5 feet. So it's about a 1.5 to 2-foot drop. So as you stand looking towards the parking lot, the bank, or you're looking towards the Wawa, I'm 6'3". The fence is probably right about here. So it's about I've measured it. It averages between maybe 4.5 to 5 feet in spots. In some places it's 6 feet, but for the most part it's not.
So starting at this corner here of the property that I'm showing here, which is your southeastern corner, and extending to this point here, where it says proposed 6-foot-high vinyl fence alongside property. So to that point, from that corner point to where it's from to the 6-foot-high fence, that's an 8-foot fence in that location?
Correct.
And then you would have a 6-foot fence for, it looks like, approximately 20 feet.
Correct.
Have you spoken to Radnor Police about this regarding site distances?
I did. I called the police Township, and I spoke to a Ken Pyrie.
Yeah.
Pyrie, he did a site visit, and we spoke last week, and he told me there was no issue with the situation on his end for 2 reasons. Just the safety component, it was a non-issue, but more important, he said, because I'm not a corner property, even though I'm the last residential property, I'm not actually on the corner. Therefore, there's no issue from a township or safety standpoint.
Now I'm going to show you some exhibits that we marked. And first, A6. Can you tell the board what A6 represents?
This is just to give a perspective of the home. So this is standing on Windsor Avenue, looking kind of southeast at my front home. On the left here, you'll see the driveway and the fence that we're talking about. That white building there would be the paint store. So the parking lot is just on the other side of that.
A7?
This is a view from my kitchen window, or our kitchen window. And you'll see the yellow building is the location of Glenn's First Resource Bank. So to give you an angle of where that bank now is going to sit, that building has been demolished. This picture was in December. So he's underway with his project. Just to the left of the sliding board is actually the corner of the property coming into mine. Again, it's kind of off-angled. So his fence that he is graciously putting up for me runs from that spot all the way to my right behind the bulldozer, the lacrosse backstop. It runs there. The current fence line would, as it stands, would continue on. So his sight line is for me, the fence is nice, but it doesn't fully relieve me of the sight line, which is more to maybe a 10.5 on the dial position.
And the fence we're talking about, the First Resource will construct, that's on your southern property.
Correct. That's a back southern view, right?
And they're installing that on their property.
Correct.
Not on yours. Okay.
This photo here, is this taken out a window or from behind your house?
This was taken from my kitchen window, which is in the center of the house. Back porch is to the left, and our main family room is off to the right on the back.
And these other buildings are commercial buildings behind there?
Correct. The ballet is there off to the right, and I don't know what that center brick one is.
A8.
This is just a view of that, my eastern property line standing on Windsor, now looking back on the fence line in question. To give you a point of reference, the backyard building that you saw in the center there is right here, First Resource Bank. Now, this is taken in February, so that yellow building's already been demolished. It would sit over in this space behind those pine trees.
And excuse me, and the fence we're looking at now, this is the one you want to replace with an 8-foot fence?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just for clarification, this fence, this belongs to the neighboring property owner?
Correct.
It does.
And do you either have a plan or an understanding regarding whether you're going to have 2 fences or 1 fence?
Just so the board is aware, the property owner's a client, and I sent him an email telling him that we'd be perfectly willing to put up our fence and he could remove his fence. I have not received a response back.
And I also called, tracked down the company, and I called and spoke to a Dave Sikora and made him aware of my intention to do this. And he had no issue. He was going to check with the property owner and get back to me. I think from his point of view, I wasn't asking for him to do anything from a cost or remediation standpoint. So,
Showing you A9 is just basically another view.
yeah. So this view is that same fence line, but now we're standing back in the corner of the BBT Bank parking lot, which is now off to the right.
So back here.
Correct, and kind of a little bit where the First Resource Bank sight line would be. It'd be actually a little bit more left because I couldn't get in there. It's gated out, but just to give you a little bit sense of the angle and the height fence and what.
Now A10.
So.
And this is looking, this photograph, again, is taken in 2007, but it's from the property to the
Right.
east of you, which is the BBT Bank, now the BBT Bank building.
Correct. So Jennifer and I bought the house in April of 2008. And at that time, the property line, the fence that we're talking about, that's the same viewpoint. We had a tall stand of arborvitae. There were 20 that were upwards of 15 feet tall. You can see the second story windows are completely covered. That stand was about 6 feet away from my house, but provided complete privacy, shielded that whole commercial side, noise, Route 30, Wawa. An ice storm unfortunately hit that in, I think it was January, February of 2014, and they had to take down that stand and replace the stand this was taken about a month after that in 2014, so you can see the impact of that arborvitae stand was pretty significant.
And this picture A11 is from 2014.
Yeah, that was April. They waited to the spring to do the replanting and they did put in a new fence as well.
And they actually, A12, they have grown some, but this is from February 2019.
Yeah, this was last month prior to the application, just to give you a sense. My hope would have been that this arborvitae would go a couple feet a year.
Yeah.
And
5, 6 years, you'll be good to go.
Exactly. And it just, the fence is 6 feet on that side, and you can see that they're all hitting at 6 feet, maybe peaking above it a little bit. But it's,
A13, these are some views we're going to show now, the board. So where is this view from? And
yeah, so just to give you the impact of that arborvitae piece on the one side, and now with First Resource Bank on and behind me, there were landscaping. There were trees taken down the back as well, which was part of the township. They agreed to do that, and Glenn's going to be doing some things. But a lot of my property now surrounded on the commercial side is just wide open. So this is on a first step of coming down from the kitchen into a patio area, and you can see the difference in the height. So that is not 6 feet there. Again, the fence was installed lower on that side. So for me, that's what I see. That's what my wife sees. My wife is a nurse, does evening shifts, and sometimes will wake up in the day to let our dogs out, and she literally feels like she has to put on, a robe or some clothes because there's eye contact with people coming in and out of the bank constantly. It is what it is, but not ideal.
We have another picture that actually shows the effect of an 8-foot fence, but we'll get to that. 814.
This is now the front of the house. So if you're walking in from the driveway, flagstone patio steps up. This is our front door view. But you look to the left, you'll see again that fence that fence right there is probably a little bit over, maybe a little bit less than 4.5 feet, and full view right into the parking lot and people coming and going. And
815.
Same perspective. This just happens to be our dining room window. So looking at now, you'll see Route 30. We see Route 30 all the way in the background. The Wawa entrance, it's grainy, but you can see Wawa. And there's just a lot always happening with noise as well and just visual impact.
Now, A16, you have some stakes up there or some wood.
Yeah, so
2x4s.
Glenn has been great with First Response. He's been over to my home several times. He has the best interests of the neighborhood and the community. And he came over with an 8-foot stick one day just to give me a sense of how tall that is. And for this, I wanted to see myself, so I went out and bought an 8-foot thing for the hardware store. And I started putting it up around my property just to see the impact of that, of what that would do, that extra, a little bit more than 2, it's about 3 feet. It blocks out everything. So that extra footage, you can see, this is that bank, the side view. Well, I'll show, so the grill, this is my grilling area. That peak there blocks out the parking lot. We don't see people, we don't see the building. This is just to the beginning of the driveway on the front side. Same view, but just further down towards the street. You can see the impact on that. And this is the south back property line, which Glenn is taking care of on his end, just to give you a sense of how that blocks that out. So it's pretty significant. It's the height variance is a significant. It just blocks everything out. I think it'll help with noise as well. Hopefully that's a good understanding.
And A17.
This, so Glenn, when he was talking about the fence, he has 2 other banks. This is Exton. And the fence that he is proposing is a very nice, high quality. It's a vinyl fence. It's a very nice fence. So I drove out to his, this is right off of Route 100 in Exton, and took a look at it just to see. And so what is being replaced most likely would be a picket fence that's wood and will deteriorate over time with a very nice fence that is going to last. And I think aesthetically, I think it's improvement to the neighborhood, to my property for sure.
And this is the type of fence that both First Resource is putting up and you're putting up as well.
Right, so the idea is if we are granted a variance or an approval, that we would just dovetail. I'd work with his vendor, and he would do his piece on the back, and I would work with that same vendor and pay them to do the continuation. So I view it personally, it's technically maybe not the right term, but as a continuation for me, a continuity piece as well.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Questions for this witness?
The part that is 6 foot, how close does that extend to the street?
So the current fence, it's it's hard to say, but the current fence sits back, the street, it stops 10 feet from the street. So if I answered your question properly, the current fence stops 10 feet short of Windsor Avenue. The idea is that 6-foot span would stop in that same spot, so it's probably close to 20 feet further in, so probably 30 feet total off the street.
The 6-foot fence would probably be, you're saying the same location as the fence, which is 10 feet, you're saying, but the 8 feet is another 30 feet. Right, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, the fence total, whether it be 8 or 6, stops 10 feet short of
Correct.
the street.
Correct.
Of the street or of the, is there a sidewalk there?
No,
Okay, so.
curb,
So 10 feet short of the curb.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the transition from 8 to 6, is that going to just be a cliff, or is it going to be gradual? As it moves towards the front of the house, there's it'll be 8 feet, but then it'll be 6 feet. And is that just, it goes from 8 to 6, or is there a
I
transition?
haven't gotten that far yet. I'd have to see the options. It's, the idea is, I think, to have an 8-foot fence all the way down approaching the street. I think it's better. I feel it's better for everybody in the neighborhood to have that lowered. And it's currently it's a 6-foot thing right now, and it stops 10 feet. So that's why I'm proposing this to drop it, not just have it go all the way across.
And if for some reason you're not able to reach an agreement with the adjoining property owner, would it be your intention to still put the fence up?
I would say yes, but my hope is that we would, it would be easier to put the fence up without that fence. And in conversation, they have no issue with what I'm doing. I think aesthetically it makes sense for them as well. Yeah, it's an improvement. Unless they're required, I don't.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Ms. Keneally, based on the fence that's proposed, there's no issues with the finished side facing one. It's the same on both sides?
Yes, I already told
Okay, so you
Chris
don't,
that if it is different, that the finished side has to be on the neighbor's side, not on his side. So he's
Okay.
aware of that, but I think
I'm
it
aware
was the
of it.
same.
okay, but currently, the finished side is on, facing his house, correct?
Correct.
Of the current fence that's there?
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not asking for any relief on the finish, and that's a whole different issue with permitting. That's all I have. Request the exhibits made part of the record, please.
Great, so moved.
Nick, the exhibit, which is the plan that you've been referring to, that shows the fence.
Correct.
That is which exhibit?
A4. And I don't know, is that marked on yours?
I don't think, no, it isn't.
I'm sorry, is A4 the
No, that's
plan
A3.
with the
A4 is
image
the
on it?
large-
Okay,
is the large
okay.
plan.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Do you have, maybe Gus, do you have that? Did you mark it? Okay.
All right, are there any members of the public who wish to be heard on this matter? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to consider this application?
I make a motion that we grant the relief for construction of the fence at the locations and in the dimensions as shown on Exhibit A4.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, the last matter for this evening is appeal number 3036. The applicants, Michael and Courtney Schiraldi, property located at 104 Eaton Drive and zoned R3-DM residential. The applicants seek relief from section 280-97B1 of the zoning code to construct a deck in the front yard setback or other such relief from the zoning code consistent with the exhibits presented. Are the applicants here?
Yep, we're here. Hi, I'm Mike, Courtney, my wife. Hi.
Okay. Be sworn in?
Yeah.
Raise your right hand, so I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm this testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Do.
And state your full name, mother,
Michael Schiraldi.
Courtney Schiraldi.
and use the microphone.
Okay, so, when you look at the back of our townhome, and this kind of the strip of townhomes adjacent to it, pretty much all our neighbors have decks, and they have a similar, setback, situation in terms of the distance between the back of their townhome and the street. So we thought that there wouldn't be an issue with going forward with the deck plan, and we've worked closely with the Devon Square Homeowners Association and have gotten their approval and have been, working with them throughout the process. But the zoning office had denied the application because it would be in violation of the front yard setback rule. In addition just to the number of neighbors with decks that would seem to be at least in nonconformance absent a variance or relief with the rule. There's a matter of kind of the history of the Devon Square townhomes and how they were built, basically. I didn't mark the name of the exhibit, but it was in an amended documents that I submitted earlier this week to the zoning office that hopefully you guys were able to receive. But I can read. There was a paragraph.
Mr. Schiraldi, I'm sorry, if you could hold on for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Kachansky is getting those amended documents for us.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's great.
But before those documents arrive, can you describe the general characteristics of the neighborhood? Obviously, your development is shown on the materials that you submitted earlier, but what's across the street? What's in the general neighborhood?
It's it's all residential. It's the Devon Square. It's on Eaton Drive, which is a cul-de-sac basically and there's a number of, so there's some single-family homes that run along Eaton Drive, and then kind of in the center of Eaton Drive, it's kind of like, goes like this, Eaton Drive, and then in the center there's townhomes, and we're in one of the townhomes, and it's many families, in terms of the residents of both the single-family homes in the development and the townhomes, and it was constructed, I believe, in the early 1980s, and we moved in what was it, late 2016?
Late 2015, November 2015.
Oh yeah, November. Yeah, we bought it in November 2015, and we really like the neighborhood and the township. We're really happy with it, and just want to try to make this deck work. And just from our perspective, the reason we wanted to build the deck was just, we wanted a safe outdoor play space for our 1-year-old twin daughters, Mia and Juliet. Right now, we don't really have we just don't have any enclosed outdoor space on the property, in either the front or the back, that they would be able to play in. And just the decks, for our neighbors and for us, it provides a physical barrier that would prevent the children from running, from the back door of our house into the street, Eaton Drive. So there's an important safety element. I mean, the Radnor Township requires that trash cans be concealed, and our neighbors usually comply with this by keeping the trash cans behind their deck. And that's something we would like to do as well. So, I mean, those are kind of the reasons. We really need an outdoor space, or we're hoping for an outdoor space with the property. We like the property. We'd like to stay there for, a long time. But it would just be difficult without having an outdoor space we could use.
Okay, we've located the additional materials you provided. So if you could
go ahead,
give us a
sorry.
description of what this deck looks like, general dimensions, nature of construction, and
Yeah,
whatnot.
maybe, I guess, I mean, this basically shows what it would look from the top.
Used mic.
This is what it would look from, an aerial view where the townhome is right here, and the deck is this right here, and it would go. We worked with the association on this. I think what we originally proposed to the zoning office was for the deck to go 10 feet 10 inches out from the end of the townhome, but the association asked us to go out 10 feet and 1.5 inches. So the reason we submitted
Could that be 12 feet, 1.5 inches? The letter I'm looking at here indicated that it was reduced from.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at.
Yeah, let's take the opportunity to mark some of the materials that you've provided for our consideration. Let's start with the application itself as A1. We're just doing some housekeeping. You guys keep looking at that, and we'll...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that what I'm looking at is the contractor may have had an error with because it's showing it going out
Okay.
10 feet 1 inch on this, but I think the intent was 12 feet 1 inch.
Okay,
Or
hold
1.5
on for just a
inches.
second. We'll get right back to you.
Yeah.
The deed is going to be A2. That's the document that has the letter from the title company on the first page there, okay?
Yes.
All right. And now let's take a look at the supplemental materials. This is a stapled, I believe, 5-page, 6-page document with the name Thomas Tyler Construction in the upper left-hand corner. So this will be A3. And we're going to number each of those pages on A3, 1 through 6. Yep, Tyler Construction sketch
And that was
thing.
that's the contractor that we
Right.
hired. They were very reputable and.
Yeah, and what this will permit us to do is to refer to specific pages so that to the extent relief is granted, we can be more specific in terms of what may be permitted by the board. Okay, so you are looking, I believe, were you looking at the last page of the Tyler Construction sketch package?
Yes.
That will be page 6 of Exhibit A3.
And I believe the intended dimensions of the deck are listed. Hard to read. Here as 22 feet wide by 12 feet. It's really 1.5 inches, but I mean, they had it as 1 inch long. I read that. Yep, sure. So that's the intended dimensions would be 22 feet by 12 feet, 1.5 inches.
So to be clear, the dimension that's shown on page 6 of A3 that might lead one to believe that the distance from the back of the house to the end of the deck being 10 feet 1 inch, your testimony is that that is erroneous?
Yes, that's my testimony. Yeah.
And it should instead be 12 feet?
12 feet 1 inch.
12 feet 1 inch. Okay, if you could, thank you for allowing us to get through a little housekeeping. Could you describe, or perhaps you have perhaps photographic demonstration of what the neighboring decks look like and how that compares to what you're proposing to construct?
So, kind of hard to see there, but that's like a view of all. That's a view of all of the units in the cluster of townhomes. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decks there, and I have photos of. So if we start from.
Hold on for just one
Yep,
second. We're going to call the ring-bound document, the multi-page, multicolor, full-color ring-bound document, 104 Eaton Drive package. So that'll be A4. And the pages are not numbered, but there is a cover page. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The pages are numbered.
Yeah, so I'm on page 7 right now.
So that'll be
for
page 7 of A4 that you're referring to now.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then page 8 just has a map of, it's the plot map, and it shows which of the units. So we were just looking on page 7 at these, right here, this cluster. There's another cluster of townhomes that's adjacent to this cluster that we just looked at, and they all have decks on their cluster.
So you're indicating that the map on page 8 of A4, each of the properties with a green dot has a deck.
Yes.
And those properties with red dots do not have decks, as we
That's correct, yep.
discussed this evening.
And then if we look at, this is our neighbor to our, if you walk into our house.
Looking at page 9.
Yeah, on page 9 on the left-hand side, they have a deck that is, is right next to our property, at 102 Eaton Drive. And then on the other side of our property, if you go to page 10, the neighbor also has a deck.
Is it your understanding that the homeowners association suggested the small change in dimensions to have your proposed deck line up with the others?
That's it. Yeah, there was there's an understanding with at the homeowners association. It's my understanding about how far the deck should go out, and each of the townhomes is a little bit. They're not all the back of the house is not the same distance across all the townhomes, so like the decks do go out at different lengths, but there's kind of what they ultimately did was they looked at the neighbor directly to our right deck and how far they went out, and they had us base it off of that. Though in the neighbor to our right's case, the homeowners association thought they went out about 8 inches too far. So that was the amendment we made. Basically, initially we based on one discussion with the president, we thought we could go out as far as the neighbor on our right's deck. But then she ultimately said she talked to the board, and she wanted us to go out about 8 inches less. So that's why we had amended the plan.
Okay, and the material used to construct the deck will be what?
So it's going to be composite. The manufacturer is AZEK. So It's, you know,
So it's not a wooden product per se, there may be some,
yeah, it's not a wooden product. The idea is that it's going to be very durable and less maintenance. Both the decking material itself would be composite, and then the railing would also be composite.
and the color?
The color of the deck would, like the decking material would be like a light brownish, or I guess like a middle tone brown color.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, the question is, will it look different than all of, I mean, obviously, the materials for the other decks have weathered over time.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming that one of the attributes of this material is that it will not change in color over time. It
Yeah,
will be
that's-
what it is on day one.
That's the hope. And the
And I'm
homeowners.
sorry, what's that color again?
It's called autumn chestnut.
It's this one right here.
Okay.
It's almost like the.
It's
color of the
pictured,
brick.
it's pictured right here. It's a little hard. So.
But something that will blend in with the appearance of the other decks, as opposed to
Yes.
standing out.
It should, and the homeowners association paid particular attention to those aesthetic aspects and approved the color of the deck and the railing.
So in addition to the homeowners association, have you spoken with immediately adjacent or nearby neighbors with respect to the proposal here?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. No, nobody has an issue with it at all. Everyone thinks it's great, and they're asking why. I guess we would have to, go to the boarding. So nobody's opposed to it.
Yeah, and the president actually lives across the street from us and sees the back of our unit, the president of the homeowners association. So she's going to see the new deck, and she's very supportive of it as well. We've spoken.
And you
before.
reminded all of them that they currently have non-conforming decks.
And then, I mean, one thing I wanted to note was, and it's in the letter from the Devon Square Homeowners Association that was submitted with the supplemental materials earlier this week.
And we'll mark that for identification, Exhibit A5. This letter is dated March 13, 2019.
So there's basically, some of the history of the Devon Square townhomes. You know, the township is really presently considering our, the front yard of our house, or I should say, what the township's, presently considering the front yard of our house to be, is really our backyard. And there's just a quote, like, there's one item that the zoning hearing board may not be aware of and is in our history. The decks are in the front yard setback because the builder, Callahan, reversed the way those townhomes faced from the approved and recorded plan without getting the required approval to do so. If they were backyards, as they now really are, the setbacks would be less, and we are pretty sure they would not need approval, and we assume that the zoning office has visited the development and observed this. And I guess, so like the way our unit really is, if you walk out what is our front door, the township now seems to consider that the backyard. And if you walk out the back door, the township's considering it the front yard. But that was really because the builder had essentially flipped the townhomes without getting the approval to do so a while ago. So the owners of these townhomes really treat what the township's saying is their front yard as their backyard. So that's just.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Just clarify a couple of it. Mr. Chair, if I could clarify a couple of exhibits. The packet does contain two different sketches. They look identical, but the dimensions, my copy, I don't know if it's in your packet as well, the last page is in color. That does have the deck as being 12 feet 10 inches. It's the same number of pages, so I just want to make sure we're clear on what the
No,
ultimate dimension of the deck's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be the maximum that he's trying to get, and it looks like it's been ratcheting back as a result of the association. But just so the board is clear, maybe the motion should include exactly what we're going to grant.
And that last page that you're referring to is the contractor's package that was included. Well, that was the contractor's package that was included, I believe, in the original materials.
Okay.
And there was a supplemental submission of materials earlier this week that I think we've seen now, that has a different last page on that. So we will be very specific to note that the diagram that we're referring to in the package from the contractor is the package that was included with the materials provided to the township this week.
And unfortunately, in the updated drawing, it does appear that the contractor made an error to the extent that, that number marked 10 feet 1 inch. If that's supposed to be the length of the deck, that's not. And it's contradicted by the note to the side of that says 22 feet by 12 feet 1 inch deck. Yeah. So that's what the board approved, was the 22 feet by 12 feet 1.5 inches, and that's what the plan is. So I would just ask that the board just disregard that 10-foot 1 inch as erroneous.
Okay.
So you're asking the board to approve a 12-foot by 1.5 inch deep deck, correct, by 22 feet in the other direction?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, it would be customary that you would move to have the exhibits that we've discussed entered into evidence.
Okay, yeah, we would move to have the exhibits we discussed entered into evidence.
Without objection. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, I would consider a motion on the application.
Move that a variance be granted to allow for the construction of a deck in the front yard setback in accordance with the plans submitted as Exhibit A3, with the clarification that the dimension of the approved deck is 22 feet by 12 feet, 1.5 inches.
I would second that.
Board discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as made?
Aye.
All opposed? No? Good luck with your project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes our business for this evening.